The sun comes up and the sun goes down. Work away, work away. We'll haul that lumber, lift that frame, grab a little shovel and do it all again. The sun comes up and the sun goes down. Work away, work away.
Well, thanks for coming, and it's an honor to have you guys at this very small shop. And I would have done it in the larger one, but we just couldn't this time. So, thanks for struggling with the outside and the mud and all that. You were talking about quantum physics, and what popped into my head was the only good quantum joke I have. So I have to share that because it only takes a second. Okay, if those of you who are into quantum physics, this is the best joke I've heard. This leaves the MIT guys rolling on the floor. It's Schrodinger's cat does and doesn't walk into a bar. Now, if you know that story, then you would get that. If you don't, you can go look at it. But I love that story because it's literally I can make those guys roll around.
There's another one I have. I'll tell you.
You want to tell it? It's a great one. But in any case, I thought what we do tonight is I think we had a meeting here before, and it is tight quarters. So I'll take the time to show you guys anything you want to see after the meeting in terms of jigs and fixtures, any of the ways we do things. We're really dedicated here. This is what I call the private shop, which is really not much distinct from what the other production company is, which is really kind of morphing into the custom division of what we do here. And we have investors and stockholders and some issues with everybody, so this is really, we're just working through that. But the private practice, which emanates out of here, has been, I've been here for about 20 years in this particular shop. And it's small, but we get a lot of work done here. So I thought I'd do a quick survey of just some work, some typical work, so you sort of see what is out there in the world that I do. This was from another show that I did, and then I have the presentation on this bass, which is a story unto itself. And the story there is that I got my good friend Bobby Vega, who's leading here, is a bassist, one of the world's best bassists actually, who just happens to be a very good friend of mine. And I built the first halfling bass for Bobby because he ordered that bass, and he's such a tremendous player that I couldn't make an instrument that wasn't really something special. And in the world of guitars, it's a very narrow place. We're very focused on what we do, and we have international organizations. We have lots of members in those organizations. It's the whole subculture. But his bass took, I think, 7 years to build, and it was the first of the halfling basses. It's kind of a complex story. And it's because I patented and designed an instrument that was flatter on the bass side and is carved up on the treble side so that it has a bigger bass response. And the reason for that is the way we hear and the physics of the top and all of that. But Bobby's also going to, around midpoint of what my presentation is tonight, he's going to demonstrate what these instruments actually do, which will be a treat unto itself, and just talk about his response, because I can't just the thing that appeals most to me about making instruments for a living, because I'm a woodworker, you can see that there's a table saw in the center of my shop. There's a sliding carriage stuck over there, and if you walk into anybody's shop who's a guitar maker, if they're really a woodworker, the table saw will be at the center of their shop. If they came up only making guitars, the bandsaw will be their world. This has been my experience over the years. How many of you have made guitars or have any interest in it? Fantastic. So you probably know some of this stuff. We have a very strong fraternal sense around the country, and I've been a big part of that. It's been a great part of my life. But anyway, this particular project presented itself because Bobby, who is a world-famous bassist, Jack Casady, called him and said, well, I hear that the Tom's basses have this special quality. I hear they can be a healing thing. I hear that, and this is all based on this new technology, which is the top design called a halfling. In the back of the room, there's Mike Gutch, who works at RGC, who's the other chief guitar maker, who's a tremendously brilliant guy who has reinvented a lot of my jigs and fixtures, been responsible for a lot of the work that we do here too. But it all kind of started with Bobby and I. So I built the first instrument for him, and what I was after was an instrument that was more able to produce more acoustic sound, not something we just amplify. I wanted something that would actually physically change the parameters of how we look at the way sound is produced on a guitar. And that has led to this long-time collaboration, and we continue to collaborate and work on stuff together and design things. And when Jack called Bobby kind of looking for, he wanted to ask him about me, Bobby sort of pushed him in my direction. Next thing you know, I have Jack up here. This instrument was built because Jack lost his wife this year after, a year ago, after I think 11-year battle with cancer or something, a very long, miserable time for him. And most of us know Jack Casady as the guy with the little glasses and the long hair, on Dick Cavett, telling everybody to do this. But that is, today we have a very sober and focused Jack. He met his wife, they became sober together, and so for half of Jack's life, as he'll say, he doesn't even remember it when he was young and on stage with Jefferson Starship, but he's a tremendously talented and brilliant musician, very deep guy, and now that he's had all the sobriety behind him, he's a very focused and special guy. So when he showed up, it was a huge honor and intimidating, but he wanted me to build this instrument as a homage to his wife, and who passed away, who he loved dearly. That's why it's the Diana bass, that was her name. And this instrument will have a lock of her hair in it. First I had to make sure it would work. And now that Jack has signed off on the fact that it works, it's great. So I built a little catbird seat in there, which you'll see in the slideshow. And I actually have her hair, a lock of her hair in the shop, and it's amazing when you pick something like that up, and you build something like this, and you're all obsessed. I'm sure most of us are compulsive on a project, because this is no different than any other woodworking project. Halfway through it, you pick up this hair, look at it, and you realize there's a person. And the brilliant and beautiful concept of Jack to have his wife's DNA residing in this instrument for the balance of his musical life is extraordinarily deep for me. That night I cried. It was incredible. I didn't put it in there yet because the bass isn't finished. But to me, it's a fabulous opportunity. So I thought it would be a good opportunity also to show you guys, this is a woodworking shop. So we interpret projects and commissions, and this is a commission, how I would handle this commission. The guitar itself is kind of narrow. We are like machinists that work with calipers. We work to thousandths. That's what we do. And, I've been on the other sides of woodworking. I actually went to work in a cabinet shop when I'd been building guitars for 3 or 4 years, and they hired me on the spot. I showed them some guitars, and they said, this kid's a genius. I think I was 22 or something. And they couldn't cut a straight line on the table saw, and it took them 2 years to teach me how to do a cut list, But what they did do, they gave me a great cabinet maker, a guy named Ross Craig, who some of you may know from the Berkeley, tremendous maker. Ross was a huge influence on me, and Ross, if you knew Ross, he's just a tremendous craftsman. And, he and his other crew of people got me straightened out, and I became a woodworker in that shop. Learned how to use shapers, make knives, do all of that stuff. And so when I came back to the world, I actually had a shop in San Francisco that I was supporting by working in the wood shop, which is the way the guitar business is. So it really rounded me out as a woodworker, and it really opened the doors it really made me see myself as a blue-collar woodworker who makes guitars, not a guitar maker who dabbles in woodworking, So for me, built a lot of kitchens, built a lot of furniture, did all of that stuff because I felt that I could not make this journey with wood unless I learned. I didn't want to be just so narrowly focused on guitars. I'm a guitar player, so I've been doing that my whole life too, and that's really why I make guitars. But because I like fixing things on solid ground. If you play a guitar, and if you're a club guitar player, you may have put 1,000,000 notes into the cosmos. And the way I look at that, I remember one night I was playing. It was the day after New Year's and New Year's Eve, 2 days down at the Rose and Thistle in San Francisco. We had a really bad night on New Year's Eve, and there was a rugby team that came in there, and there were guys stiffing $20 bills in my pocket and saying, "Play Bloody Sunday again," which we did maybe 8 or 9 times. Everybody was hammered. It was a great gig from every perspective, but I knew we didn't sound good that night, And the next night we came in, and we were great. And I knew, this is an old band that I had, we were great. And I knew, and nobody cared because nobody was involved with it. They were just sort of hanging out, recovering. And at that moment, I realized that for me, the tours that I did when I was young, all of that stuff that I did as a player, it was not going to work for me because I realized I maybe put 1,000,000 notes out there, and maybe who knows what I really did put out there, who actually heard it, were they sober, were they not. My personality was more suited to being home, and I had a daughter when I was young and wanted to be with her too. So that's really how I wound up doing this for a living. And so that's kind of the story, a little bit of my background. And I've been here for about 20 years. I love it in Healdsburg, and I wish I had more time to be involved with everything in my life, including more SCWA time. I'm the kind of idiot who would volunteer for one of those positions maybe in a year or two, but I just got out of another catbird seat, and I don't have time. I'm trying to catch up. Anyway, this is just a quick summary of some of the work that I've done. I've always worked with 1 or 2 or 3 people in this shop. They're usually on their way to their own careers. They're usually very talented. I see another very talented guy back there who's collaborating with me on this project as well. Larry Robinson, is that Larry back there? There he is. Great inlay artist who should be doing one of these projects himself. But in any case, here's a quick survey of some of the work I've done. This is how I started. I was 15. This is me, the nerd here. It's amazing when you look at this. These guys are all still alive. This is me with my first shop in San Francisco down on Project 1, if anybody knows that, down on 10th and Howard Street. Total discipline. That's my first bass that I ever built. That's me as a young dog with a shop on Guerrero Street. That's some of my bands, and some of the stuff I did. These are some of the products that I still to this day make. This is a semi-hollow style guitar, which is all carved. Everything I do is carved. I've always had a fascination with carved guitars, carved tops, what I call the Z-axis in guitar design, which is a completely different thing. And I always wanted to do something with that. So when I was very young, I was doing this and doing it badly. And if I could buy the first 50 instruments I built and destroy them, I would do that, because I think we all know that feeling. These are pretty contemporary. This one's probably 25 years old. These are probably all 15 to 20 years old. But these are all archtop guitars, which are what jazz guys play.
When you talk about carving, you're talking about on the inside or the outside?
Inside and the outside.
Both. Okay.
Both the inside and the outside. And the carving cage happens to be located behind the screen here, and I'll be happy to show people that after we stop this stuff. Almost everything we do here is a carved top. We do, every once in a while, we'll build a few flat top steel string guitars, which are a consistent 90 thousandths thickness top, which you see mostly, you guys mostly know the difference between these kinds of guitars, but these are jazz guitars based on the model of a violin. They're designed to create sound. Yes, sir.
I was just going to say, if you want to point out those things that I just brought in off the,
I will.
fresh off the carver there.
I will certainly do that. We'll get to that, not right yet, but I will. This is some of the quilted mahogany. This is a steel string that I built probably 25 years ago. And some of this, we all know the tree. And because I've known David Marks since I was right after puberty, I think, we've both been chasing this tree like many of us have for years, and I built a lot of instruments out of it. I have a 40 inch wide by 10 foot long board over there, 2 inches thick, 1.8 inches thick next door. And from that is where I'm building this instrument that's on this cradle, which is kind of cool. Part of a trio of instruments. One piece back, which is extraordinarily rare, 17 inches wide. We can throw some water on that and enjoy that later. But this project specifically is focused on, so I have a fascination with this material. I've been lucky enough to work with it. This was in the Chenery Blue collection, which is a famous blue collection. That is Seal's guitar, this gold one here. This belongs to an artist in LA, a guy named Lou Rossi. That's Larry Robinson's incredible inlay work on that fretboard, which is not well detailed in this presentation. Mostly these instruments are finished with lacquer and MEK-based dyes, and there's a spray booth in the garage in there, and this is where I use conventional lacquer, Seagrave lacquer. I still haven't found a finish that I think, when you make a guitar in the super high end of the strata of the marketplace, not the super high, any place in the quality end, you should be thinking about making it so that it's better in 10 years. You know, you build it and you make guitars like you make wine. You think, you know what I love most about guitars? It's that they're instruments, you know, and a kitchen cabinet is an instrument and a sailboat's an instrument. If I weren't making guitars, I'd be making boats, because I love the fact that these things interact with their environment, and that to me is the thing that really drives me. And you know, I built a lot of kitchens when I was younger, and they drove me too, and they're instruments too. They interact in a different way with the environment, but I love the fact that guitars are working tools and they'll outlive me. Most of these instruments, I'll build about 800 instruments by the time I'm gone, I think. And out of those, maybe 10 of them will survive 300 years, you know. For me, that's a great feeling. It means I feel like I say this often, but at the end of my life, it would be beauty 1, ugly 0. At least I got that done, and I left some kind of footprint on the planet, and they were still tools that people were hopefully making music with. So I look at that as a win column for beauty. You know, one less than the ugly.
So is that a tinted lacquer, the blue, or did you dye it?
It's blue, and it's a blue dye in the lacquer, not dyed. I never dye wood on a guitar.
Yeah, so that's a tinted lacquer.
It's a tinted lacquer, shot over a sealer. Take the binding, scrape the bindings back.
And then you took it off. Okay.
Yeah, I've gotten very fascinated with layering colors, and different MEK dyes have different properties and different refractive properties. So I got into Japanese lacquer, urushi, for a while, and realized that you can work with conventional lacquers and MEK dyes by cross-layering them in a very specific way to get incredible refraction. So this is really what I've become a specialist at in my world. But this instrument was built only about 3 years ago. And this is hanging behind my house out there when it was so beautiful a day. And I put it outside to get free air on it, you know, shot it in the spray booth and brought it out. But all of the shading here is just black lacquer that's been a little bit of black in the mixture. And I like to think of that as a canvas, you know. I love the work, the color work. Some more. This one I built with a great friend of mine, Linda Manzer, who's a maker in Canada. And we had sort of a baby together and built this guitar. There's another view of it. It's pretty famous. It lives in Paris. So this is just more stuff. This might be somebody's inlay work that I know. One of my favorites, that's more Larry Robinson work right there. I always love that fingerboard. That's my inlay work. That's a painted a naked lady that blooms out here every year. I take pictures of it every year, and I reproduce it on the top of guitars. It's a little different every year, and on the really special ones. It keeps going through these things ad nauseum. This is a first halfling guitar that I built, which is what this is all a family of, this Jack Diana bass. This was built about about 9 years ago, and it led to a lot of more of these. And it's, like I said, it's a patented top design. And I wanted to create an instrument that was more in sync with what people's literatures were today. And for archtop guitar players who say that archtop guitars have no bass, this was my response to that, to say it's possible to make an instrument that still produces the qualities of an archtop guitar, ability to hear complex chords, but is capable of producing a bass, because most archtop guitars are conventional, have this kind of sound. But that is not, that's because, from my perspective, it's a human hobgoblin as to making everything symmetrical. Symmetry doesn't exist regularly in all aspects of nature. So an asymmetrical top is more practical relative to how it suits our ear, and this is really what the patent is written on. I only patented so I could raise money to make these bloody things. And so it's halfling technology. Oh, who's that? That might be Mr. Vega. This is the first bass. This is the Bobby Vega bass, which he still plays and still loves.
What does halfling mean? I keep thinking of the hobbits.
Say what?
What does halfling mean? I keep thinking of
Well, that's why I
hobbits.
called it the halfling, because it's half flat and half arched.
Okay.
So if you look at the profile of this instrument, for example, it's pretty subtle, but you'll see if you were looking at guitars normally, this is the bass side, and you see this time's flatter, it's carved up more on the treble side. And that produces a differentiated response. You can hear the octave difference between the two. That was an assumption that had been made that was not possible, so it kind of opened the door. This is the other shop in the setup room, Mike Gutch's shop, really, and there's Mike Tardif in that shop. Like I say, I love to do it over there, and we will be able to do it again. Right now we can't.
What's the purpose of the hole?
What's the purpose of the hole?
Yeah.
Well, a guitar hole, any hole in a guitar, whether it's in the center of the guitar or up in the top corner, exists to port an instrument to make it the most efficient low-end response. So in other words, if you've got a speaker cabinet, they have ports in them too.
Right.
That's really what a sound hole does in a guitar.
Most guitars have their hole right over the strings.
Yeah, or right under the strings, right in the center here.
Right.
This is part of the reason when I developed this kind of instrument, because I didn't have to punch a hole in it here and here to make the top move. And because it's flatter on that bass side, I was able to really thin that side, put the hole up here, and not lose any structural strength there. And that's part of the sound of that instrument, is that I have that part of the bass real estate to work in. So far this is a pretty conventional group. Well, none of these are conventional. This instrument was really designed by Mike Gutch. This is a version of an electric version of an instrument that's flat and carved up like a halfling guitar as well. And we've sold quite a few of those over the years. That company has been a study in bringing investors into your life and letting everybody have a little piece of what you do. And what I've often said is that a friend of mine called me and he said, I finally have a piece of you because I bought some stock. And I said, no, you don't. You have a piece of stock in a company that makes what I make. Nobody will ever own any of my private body of work unless they buy it. I can't do that because, none of us can. If we do what we do and we're here for this reason, I just can't have people telling me, I can only take so much of that. I'm old enough now that I just don't want to hear about it anymore. I think we all have experienced this. This is the chambered interior of a halfling electric guitar that Mike has engineered over at RGC. It's a cheaper way of making it, and that's morphed into a fantastic instrument. We often do parties here in the summer and do concerts because I can put a couple of hundred cars in the back here when it's dry, and we have a stage that goes out there. So we have 6 or 7 house concerts every year. And if you like, just I should publish that list and send it to the SCWA. You guys would always be welcome to come. We'll give you a better rate to get in. This is Megan Wells. She worked for me for 4 years, and she's now out on her own from Sebastopol. And that's Stuart Day. He's now gone. You see the shop in a normal day where the tools are. This is a wonderful, that's an owl. We had owls up in the attic here, and I just love these. This has led to an owl guitar for the bird rescue people. Isn't this the cutest thing? I mean, I'm a guy. I'm not supposed to find things cute, but that's cute. That's my pickup. It's made for me. This is another famous instrument I restored. All right, enough of that stuff. Let's get to the Diana bass stuff, because this is all jigging and fixturing. We had a reality show that we signed a deal with Extreme Makeover people for a while, and it fell off the table, but this is the crew that was working at the time, and they were trying to paint us as sort of the dirty dozen. It got old, frankly. But look at young Mike Gooch there.
That's about 30 or 40 pounds ago, too.
Yeah, it was anyway, it was quite a ride over the last 15, 20 years of this mayhem here. But let's put the other thing in there, because that'll be the Diana base, and I'll really focus on that. Does anybody have any questions while we're changing this over about guitars?
Do you work together on a project, or is each person working on his own project?
Well, mostly I'm the designer and I'm the boss, so mostly it's what I, ask to be done, but I really try to involve people in what happens here. So, for example, in the other shop, when these two businesses existed next to each other, one's a private, one's a production company, theoretically. Well, when Mike designs something, it's really something he does. I get involved with it, we talk, I give him some ideas, he reinterprets it, I try to give people as much freedom as I can. Because I don't, well, the thing I learned about building great instruments is that, you can build good instruments and a good guitar player. I can go play a gig with a $300 guitar up and down all week long. I can also play a guitar with a $50,000 guitar, play a gig with a $50,000 guitar. A good guitar player can make both of them sound pretty good. So you really, if you want great guitars that exceed and outlive you, you've got to have people putting 110, 120% into it. Like I always say, with the kind of folks I've worked with over the years, it's like putting 100-watt bulbs in 60-watt sockets. I get way more than I ever asked for. And if I feel like, as I always say to people, if I ever feel like I have to, this is going to roll as it's a movie time movie, not a PowerPoint, so we'll just keep rolling here. Let me pause it, if I can find the pause button. Pause, pause, pause.
Does that have a pause on
I don't know. Do you have a pause?
it? I just paused it there. I can pause it.
If you don't mind pausing it, that would be great. Just to get finished with what I was saying there. What was I saying?
So if you have one person that's working on something, he'll take it from birth to...
No, we'll all collaborate. For example, on this particular instrument, Jordy is doing the binding on the instrument, which is one of the more complex things to do. I carved the top, I carved the back, I made the side unit, some of the other folks who work for me. Things like this is a 14 carats gold ring in the rosette here, which I did that myself. I hired a jeweler to silver, so the gold solder at this kind of thing. So we all have sub-specialties, and I try to keep everybody working. I also have people who are great at finish, and I have them help me with that. So we wear different hats, because I find we're not a factory. And one thing I've discovered is I'm not a good guy with the factories. I'm not a production guy. I'm the last guy you want to bring in and say, make a lot of something. I'm just not good at it. Some people are, and I'm not. So I've learned that lesson many times the hard way. So I try to focus. What I'm trying to do at this point in my career is practice like a physician or a when I refer to what I do, I call it my practice. When I deal with clients on the higher end, I refer to them as my clients. I don't refer to them as any other way. And so with this and this is what I mean about this particular commission, why this is so special is because if Jack comes to me and he says, I hear your instruments have this healing quality, and he's a monster of the American historical music scene, I have a chance to practice at the highest possible level. So for every time I have to make a guitar for somebody who just wants one to invest in it, and I'm grateful for it all, trust me. But to practice on the level with an artist who really has a deeper vision is the best it gets for me. And so I thought this project was really worth presenting because it doesn't get any better than this for me from my point of view. Otherwise, it's like making kitchens. I once built a kitchen for a pair of professional gynecologists. You've all been in this nightmare where the punch list is there every day. And, there are pieces of paper stuck on everything that they see. A giant P-lamb kitchen. It's what drove me out of working on kitchens. These guys drove me crazy. So they didn't care about any of this stuff. It was just all about the money and the so, you put that hat on and you do the work and you get paid, and that's great. But to have a commission like this is really special. And Jack is a sensei of tone. This is what he made very clear to me. And you can go look at, we did a show here that Gerard filmed where we interview Jack as we go through this process. So if you want to hear what this guy has to say, you can find this on YouTube. And maybe I can send the link to the SCWA and you can send it out in the newsletter, And it's been it's just been a special thing because when I was 20, I used to go watch Jack in the Fillmore. He was 30. And I used to think, someday I'm going to meet this guy, and now we've become close enough where, you can call me an idiot or whatever he wants, and it's extraordinary. So that to me is a great privilege. And the same thing with Maestro over here in the corner, who's really one of the world's best. Okay, we can move that forward. This is a movie time movie rather than a slideshow. It has music in it, but it's nice to see this. So I figured it's about a 15-minute version of this so I can answer questions and get through it. There's music here. If I can, I don't even know if I can move this forward. Okay. This is how the project began, by modeling it in, Jack said to me he wanted an instrument that would be approximate what a double bass would do, not just a guitar. And it occurred to me that we could put a wedge shape in the thing, oppose the planes in a way that there were no standing waves in the instrument, and have a deeper bass air mass to get that deeper response. You want to pause that for a second? So I can talk about these. Thank you. If it's possible. Cool, thank you. So I'll get into the methods and stuff, but the history of the deal was, so he says, can you build an instrument that will produce what Bobby's bass will do? Bobby is a tremendously skilled player. Jack is a guy who concentrates on hitting one note at a time. Bobby's another generation of player who sort of redefined his generation of playing. And like Jack says, I can't play like Bobby. I can't play like that fast, but I play, this is what I'm after. So he asked me for a very specific tone, and so I designed this instrument to be really unique, have the half-link technology in the top, but to get as much air mass in as I could and ergonomically still fit on the lap of a guy who was 5'4". Jack's about this big. And so when you see him on stage wearing the crazy stuff from the airplane days, it's because he was small. He'd get dressed up in that stuff so he could look bigger, but he's a smaller man, so I have to always think about that when I make an instrument. There are the ergonomic considerations. So in the case of this instrument, we saw that modeling of those two sections. So I created Jack came up to visit, and I created it's sitting actually back there, hanging up there, a couple of pieces of poster board, and we just moved it till I got it to the place where I thought it would work for him and I could get the maximum air mass. I studied films of him playing, and I could see he plays like this. He looks at the instruments like this. So when you put this wedge-shaped instrument, which is sitting there on your lap, it sits out like this. You normally have them like this. So this wasted space is used for more bass and more air mass. The larger the air mass in a bass, i.e. a big stand-up bass, you can go boom with that thing, and you'll feel it in your chest. But a guitar is very small. The length of the fingerboard, the length of the soundboard is so small, it's not even technically capable of producing that big a bass wave. So you have to fool the instrument into thinking it's producing that wave and moving the air. The way a guitar works is the air is excited by motion on the top. That excites the air in a room. This exists for it to port it for bass, and it's tuned to the right frequency so it maximizes its fundamental or its lowest response. That's called the Helmholtz frequency. And every air mass has one of those. That's why most guitars have roughly the same size sound holes, because they're pretty much the same size. That hole is defined carefully with mathematics to be related, and you can go figure this out. Radio Shack is a great book on making speaker cabinets. In there are all the formulas for the port size on any efficient deal. Helmholtz was a German scientist, or Austrian scientist, I think, who developed the concept of low frequency response, which is what we were all chasing. It's easy to get something to respond and hear it in a high frequency because our ears are much more sensitive. Lower frequencies, we hear on a curve that's like this. So it takes a lot of energy to make a low bass note that you hear. It takes very little energy to make a treble note that you can hear. Our hearing is an amazing thing.
So a stand-up bass is reproducing the same frequency, but
yes, it is, but it's actually physically able to move more air
So
because of the
it's
size of the
more
sound,
volume.
more volume.
Yeah.
And technically, it's long enough. A standing bass wave, I think an A note is about 38 feet long. It's like if you actually look at what so you've got a soundboard that's this big, and you're trying to make this thing. It's like the minor bird coming out of the jungle. So you rely on the physics of the back and the top. I love to go to high schools and talk about this because people say, one of the things I discovered, why we got the reputation for saving troubled kids is because if your father tells you something is cool, it's not. But if you come to somebody like me and I say that's cool, you can pursue excellence and it's a good thing to do, then it's really cool. So, it has nothing to do with being any kind of my kid would go to my neighbors and they would say, neighbors would call up and say, boy, he did all the dishes, he took out the garbage, and I'd go, what was his name? Because that's not my kid. That's... So to build this instrument, we used a method of building a mold, which is where these guitars start. And I built this with MDF and cyanoacrylate or crazy glue. It's a very quick way to make a mold because I make certain models of guitars. I make 9 different models that I'm pretty highly tooled for. Although we are primarily hand-driven, we still have molds and jigs and fixtures. But this one, to make a quick mold of a radical shape, we made this out of particle board, MDF, which of course I got from Mount Storm, 1-inch particle board and 3/4-inch particle board. And you can see they're just crazy glued down to the work surface. And these are just laminated together and crazy glued down. In fact, Jordy did most of the work on this particular, see somebody else I know back there. Jordy did most of the work on this particular mold. What I discovered a long time ago is that even when, say we never built this prototype again or it didn't go into production, I could take a hammer and just shock these pieces of particle board off and use them on the next one. And so, you know, crazy glue runs through the veins of guitar makers, although for many years nobody wanted to admit it. We use a lot of crazy glue, and I've seen instruments that I glued together 35 years ago with crazy glue where there's been virtually no creep as compared to tight bond with rosewood joints in the back of the soundboards where there has been creep because tight bond will creep a little bit. So I have consummate faith in crazy glue. When I was younger, nobody would talk about it because it was, you know, all the other instrument makers would say, "Oh, those filthy guitar makers, they're just gluing things together with crazy glue." And so we get people coming out of guitar schools who are crazy glue crazy, and we have to kind of notch them back and explain there are different adhesives. There's hide glue, there's fish glue, which is really the great glue now. Fish glue is way more fun than hide glue now that I'm using. But anyway, we start this in a way that I can actually make it. So in the case of this instrument, because the planes were all so weird, I built a 9-inch set of sides. We bent it on a hot pipe and just a simple bender, which gets up to about 250 degrees, and we just wet the material, rock it on there, and work it around. It's one of the great joys of making instruments is that, because a lot of this is brutality, risk-taking, and ruination. So there are some things that really make me feel like a guitar maker. Bending sides still makes me feel like a guitar maker. What I thought when I was 18, my life would be full of romance and being in a shop, then I got sent out on job sites by cabinet making companies, and I realized, you know, this is hell on earth. So being in your own shop where, you know, some things are really great to do. I wouldn't jig and fixture some things because I just love doing them. I still like doing them. And you know how it is if you're a professional woodworker, you got to find ways to reinvent what you like some days when you hate what you're doing. Because some days I hate this, and yet I still find a way to love it because you can't build them without passion. So this is a 9-inch thick piece of myrtle, peckerwood, bay laurel. That's what's on. This is this instrument before we cut it down, sitting on this carriage here. And this is the base we're talking about. Not finished yet. It's after this meeting, I'm going to take it apart and start the finish process. But you can see how wide that is. Very hard to bend something that wide. The only way I could loft this, because I didn't want any standing angles in this, was to build it 9 inches wide and then make a skirt to go around it. I wanted no 90-degree angles in here. I wanted like stealth technology. I wanted no place for standing waves to build up. So we built a skirt that was the outside shape of this, and then lofted it with a half pencil all around here, and then just cut it out with a handsaw and everything else we could get our hands on. It wasn't pretty, but we did it. So as a result of that, there are no 90-degree angles anywhere in this instrument, which makes the binding a nightmare. It makes all of the rest of it much more difficult. But I think it really contributed to the quality of what this instrument sounds like, because you can see it's very wide here, and it gets very narrow here. And
what kind of spruce is on the top?
This is an Engelmann spruce that I bought about 25 years ago. It was big enough. It's hard to get billets this big because, you know, to have it long enough to do this. That calendar back there that's on the wall was an instrument I built for somebody in Montreal a few years ago, and it wound up on the front of that calendar, and that turned into a reverse teardrop thing, which is, there's a type of instrument built that most of the makers build called a teardrop. Most of them build it on this side. I put it on this side to differentiate what I do, and because for me it's more base real estate, you know. And so, put this back on the carriage here so I don't lose this, and you can handle this. Thank you.
Interesting bridge.
Yeah, that's a Kasha bridge, kind of influence bridge, because I studied with Kasha, who was a great physicist who taught about my system of understanding has me use one side as a lever for the top. But we can move forward if you would, and I'll try to keep up with it. A good way of making a cheaper and easy to fabricate mold for an unusual shape. Because building a regular guitar mold can be really complicated. You can see we've clamped the wet sides in there after bending on the pipe, and they just dry in there. And I thought this was actually better than a PowerPoint because at least something's moving, you know. It's got some fun. It's pretty crude. I mean, realistically speaking, this is not high-tech stuff. This giant structure in here is a tail block. This I'm very proud of because this is the point. I love to call David up and say, you know, I cut that freehand on a bandsaw. And he said, did you film it? And I said, no. So he said, you know, darn it. But it was the only way I could think to do that. That's the end block, or the block that sits where the tail of the guitar is. It has to support probably 90 pounds for its lifetime with the strings pulling on it. You know, that's like hanging somebody up for 100 years for 90 pounds. So a lot of structural issues in guitars. This is the inside reinforcement of that point, which is ebony. And
Ebony because
I'm sorry.
because it's straight grain.
Yeah, straight grain, tough, fits in with guitar aesthetic, you know. And this is after it's been cut out. This is the skirt I was talking about. And so we lofted that around there. I couldn't think of another way to pattern these and have them really all work, so we did it the hard way. And now we're going to make he has a second one on order. We're going to do it by lofting these. But I had to make sure this thing worked because it might not have worked in the first place. That's the big issue. So that seemed to be a very low-tech way to do it, but it worked out really, really well. I think Jordy and I spent a day actually cutting the sides down, and because the chances of tearing the side apart or something, it's going to be really difficult. So we actually sawed through the end blocks with a hand saw like that. It was kind of crazy.
You do one bend at a time?
No, we bend the whole half side at once, yeah, but you work on the whole thing because you get it all warm and kind of get it pliable. Surgical clamp from my father was a medic in World War II, which I still use for those things.
Tom, who owns well, eventually when you finish this, do you own the entire intellectual property rights to the design and idea, or is it?
Well, it is my design, and I have the patent on the halfling, which is really the heart of it, the technology. And there's a new invention in here, which I've just addended to the patent. Can you hold on to that for a second? This is a door on the inside of the instrument. This is kind of interesting because, to answer your question more thoroughly, I patented the halfling, so anything that comes under that, I just send an addendum. And this has a new bit of technology which takes string brace basing and combines it with guitar basing, and you can see more of that as we get further into it. And that's a new invention, so that had to be addended. But to build a door on an instrument is a really complex challenge and do it aesthetically. And so what I did is I tried to transmit the stress to the giant end block of mahogany by building these ebony pieces that fly out and support this framework on the inside of the door. And that has actually worked out very well because when you weaken something like this a lot when you cut a hole in it, And the whole cutting of that door was interesting because I cut one out with a jeweler saw, and from that point on I had to keep doing that. So my buddy Maestro Larry helped me there by providing me with a jeweler saw that I could actually bend the tines on to get around those corners. So the line is the same material, and it's about 15 thousandths on that door there, which I really wanted I wanted that to be, because it's cool, I wanted it to be cool. So the door's a lot of fun. The parts were all made and then polished and taken out to taken to the buffing wheel before they're glued in place because I cannot possibly clean this stuff afterwards. I've laminated a piece of Indian rosewood on the inside of this because that sides are about 90 thousandths thick. It gives me a more substantial door that will remain stable. And that door will be there so you can get your hand inside. So you can, there's a trap door in the instrument which allows you to open and shut the door, and you'll see some details there. But also, amplifying something like this can be very difficult. So I wanted to have access for the technicians who will do that, because this instrument will see a lot of stage time. And basses are very difficult to... Jack is so concerned with every single note. When he came and played this for the first time, he sat in the house, and he played every single note painstakingly up and down and he filmed himself doing it, and he's still sitting there listening to that now. And, working with somebody of that focus is a joy, frankly.
And so the doors for what?
Sorry?
The doors for what?
So you can get your hand in there so you can, for amplification purposes, you can install amplification systems. It's got a removable trap door inside that lets you close and open the door, the porthole. That's to get that mechanism out if you need it. And it's to see the inside of it because, we see the insides of guitars a lot. They're beautiful, and nobody else does. So when you have a complex thing that you could run that again. If you have a complex thing...
See that for a second, there may be a pause.
You see it?
There's a pause.
You might see that, and I might not.
No, it sure doesn't look like it.
I'm sorry to ask you to work on that.
Oh, no problem.
I could actually stand there if it's easier for you. But anyway, I drilled out this hole to reduce the weight there of that huge end block, but also I wanted to put a window seat in here for the hair. You're not hearing the music, of course. For the hair strand, so I wanted to find a place to put that. So this is a box seat for her hair. As I described it to Jack, she'll be able to sit there and be part of everything you do and have a window seat in the theater of the inside of your rest of your life, and for him that's a huge deal. So it's a kind of a bizarre thing, but it's a great thing and a beautiful thing, and I still get very touched. I refer to it as the catbird seat to him, and he loves that concept. So this is just a bit more of the inside of the rim, which is the most complicated thing to build on this guitar for the first time. And anyway, that's more of the stuff there. Now I'm actually lagging.
Is Jack playing in a band somewhere? Or is
He plays with Hot Tuna still. He's still tuning.
Playing with Hot Tuna?
Yeah,
With
still
Yarma? Yeah.
touring 200 days a year maybe with Hot Tuna. Still playing with Yarma. he wanted us to come down and see him in San Francisco, you know, right before we did this. That's that bandsaw miter, and that's just done by turning the bent sides around, taping them together, cutting them at once, and then masking tape or strapping taping them tight together. And it worked out pretty well. You can see this is where the pencil line still exists, well, now it's gone. This is the door that I pierced out with the jeweler's saw, which was a lot of fun. And this is that miter, which I'm actually pretty proud of. It was difficult. I was worried about, I lost sleep over that. In order to get these corners of this cutout door, I had to take the jeweler's saw, the Larry Deep Throat jeweler's saw, and bend the tine so I could get it around in there. So with the ebony support behind it, and now you're looking into the instrument, it's really a beautiful thing, the inside of a guitar, you know. And so I sent Jack a note. I said, hey, look at this. Wouldn't this make a great performance center if guitar players could sit in here and play, and the ceiling was X-braced like this? Wouldn't that be a beautiful thing? And he loved that idea. For him, this is deep.
The sun comes up and the sun goes down. Work away, work away. We'll haul that lumber, lift that frame, grab a little shovel and do it all again. The sun comes up and the sun goes down. Work away.